Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to my channel. I'm Margaret, and if this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button right now. It means the world to me and helps me continue sharing these life stories that might just change your perspective. Today, I need to share something deeply personal with you. Something that shattered my heart into a million pieces, but ultimately taught me the most valuable lesson about strength, dignity, and sometimes, divine justice. This is the story of how my own daughter threw me out of her life like I was nothing more than trash, and how karma had the most unexpected way of evening the score. Before we dive in, I want you to do something for me. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Whether you're in New York, London, Mumbai, or anywhere else in this beautiful world, I want to say hello to each and every one of you. You're part of this family, and your stories matter to me just as much as mine matters to you. Let me take you back to where it all began. 32 years ago, when I held my daughter Sarah in my arms for the first time, I made a promise. I whispered into her tiny ear, "I will give you everything I never had, sweetheart. You'll never want for love, never question your worth, and never face the world alone." And I kept that promise. Oh, how I kept it. I was 23 when Sarah was born, barely more than a child myself, but I was determined to be the mother I wished I'd had. Her father, well, let's just say he decided fatherhood wasn't for him when Sarah turned 2. So it became just us against the world. I worked 3 jobs to put her through private school. While other mothers slept, I was cleaning offices at night, serving breakfast at a diner in the early morning, and doing data entry from home in the afternoons. My hands were constantly cracked from cleaning chemicals, my feet ached from standing all day, but every sacrifice felt worth it when I saw Sarah excel in her studies. "Mom, you don't have to work so hard," she'd tell me when she was little, her big brown eyes filled with concern that broke my heart. "Everything I do is for you, baby girl," I'd respond, tucking her into bed with stories about princesses who were strong and smart and could conquer anything. "One day, you'll understand." I saved every penny I could. While Sarah wore beautiful clothes and had the latest school supplies, I shopped at thrift stores and mended my own clothes until they fell apart. I wanted her to fit in, to never feel different, to never carry the shame of poverty that had followed me throughout my own childhood. When Sarah graduated valedictorian from high school, I cried tears of pure joy. She was accepted to 3 prestigious universities, and even though the financial aid didn't cover everything, I had managed to save enough to make up the difference. Almost. Here's where the story takes its first heartbreaking turn, and where I made the decision that would come back to haunt me in ways I never imagined. I owned a small house, nothing fancy, just a modest 2-bedroom place I'd bought with a VA loan after my brief stint in the Army Reserves. It was our home, filled with Sarah's childhood memories, her height marks on the kitchen doorframe, the garden where we planted sunflowers every spring. It represented everything I'd worked for, my only real asset, my security. But Sarah's dream school was expensive, very expensive. Even with scholarships and my savings, we were still $40,000 short for her 4-year degree. I could have suggested she go to a state school, could have asked her to take out loans, could have made her find another way. Instead, I sold our house. "Mom, you can't do this," Sarah said when I told her, tears streaming down her face. "This is your home. Our home." "Homes are just buildings, sweetheart," I told her, though my heart was breaking. "Your education is your future. That's worth more than any building." I sold the house and moved into a tiny studio apartment across town. It was barely 400 square feet, with a Murphy bed, a kitchenette, and a bathroom so small I could barely turn around in it. But Sarah's tuition was paid, and that's all that mattered to me. For 4 years, I lived in that cramped space, working my multiple jobs, sending Sarah care packages, and visiting her whenever I could afford the gas money. She thrived in college, Dean's List every semester, internships, study abroad programs. I was so proud I thought my chest might burst. "I'm going to take care of you one day, Mom," she'd promised during our phone calls. "When I graduate and get a good job, I'm going to buy you the most beautiful house you've ever seen." Those words sustained me through the lonely nights in my studio, through the ache in my back from working too much, through the embarrassment of having friends ask why I was living in such a place when I used to have a lovely home. And Sarah did make good on her promise, at least partially. She graduated with a degree in marketing and landed a fantastic job at a prestigious firm in the city. Within 2 years, she'd been promoted twice and was earning more money than I'd ever dreamed of. She met David, a lawyer from a good family, and they had a fairy tale wedding that I helped pay for. Though Sarah doesn't know that, I secretly took out a small loan to contribute to the reception she dreamed of. Sarah and David bought a beautiful house in an upscale neighborhood. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a gourmet kitchen, and a backyard that looked like something from a magazine. I was so happy for her, so proud of the woman she'd become. "Mom, I want you to move in with us," Sarah said about a year after they'd settled into their new home. "That studio apartment is ridiculous. You've sacrificed enough." I was hesitant at first. Newlyweds need their space, and I didn't want to be the interfering mother-in-law. But Sarah insisted, and David seemed genuinely welcoming. "Your family," he said with that charming smile of his. "Besides, Sarah talks about you constantly. I'd love to get to know the woman who raised such an incredible daughter." So I moved in. They gave me the guest bedroom, which was larger than my entire studio apartment. I had my own bathroom, and Sarah insisted I think of the house as my home too. For 2 years, it was wonderful. I helped with cooking and cleaning, not because I had to, but because I wanted to contribute. Sarah was working long hours, often traveling for her job, and I could see the stress starting to wear on her marriage. I tried to be supportive, to help however I could. I babysat when they had date nights, maintained the garden because I loved having that connection to the earth again, and was there to listen when either of them needed to vent about work stress. I thought we were a family. I thought I had found my place. I was wrong. The changes were subtle at first. Sarah started coming home later, more stressed, more irritable. She'd snap at David over small things, and I noticed they weren't laughing together the way they used to. "Are you two okay?" I asked Sarah one evening while we were cleaning up after dinner. "We're fine, Mom," she said curtly. "Just work stuff. You wouldn't understand." That stung more than she probably realized. I might not have had a college degree, but I understood stress, sacrifice, and the weight of responsibility better than most people. Then David started working late more often. Weekend golf trips became more frequent. Sarah grew suspicious, and I could see the paranoia creeping in. She'd check his phone when he was in the shower, question him about his schedule, accuse him of things I couldn't even imagine. "Sarah, honey, maybe you two should talk to someone," I suggested gently. "A counselor or—" "I don't need advice, Mom," she snapped. "I need support." But I wasn't sure what kind of support she wanted. When I tried to be neutral, she accused me of taking David's side. When I tried to be sympathetic to her concerns, she said I was feeding her paranoia. I felt like I was walking on eggshells in what was supposed to be my home. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in March. Sarah had discovered that David had been having lunch regularly with a female colleague, something completely innocent, as it turned out, but Sarah's jealousy and insecurity had reached a boiling point. "He's cheating on me," she screamed, throwing her phone across the living room. "I know he is." "Sarah, sweetheart, maybe there's an explanation. Stop defending him," she whirled on me, her face twisted with rage I'd never seen before. "You always defend him. You like him better than me." "That's not true, and you know it," I said calmly. "I love you more than life itself. I just think maybe you're letting your fears get out." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What? Get out of my house. I can't deal with both of you right now. Sarah, this is just the stress talking. Let's sit down and—" "Get out," she screamed, and I saw something in her eyes that terrified me. It wasn't just anger. It was hatred. Pure, undiluted hatred directed at me, the woman who had given up everything for her. What happened next will be burned into my memory until the day I die. David tried to intervene. "Sarah, you don't mean this. She's your mother." "She's not my mother right now," Sarah snarled. "She's just another person trying to control my life, trying to tell me I'm wrong about everything." I felt my knees go weak. This couldn't be happening. This wasn't my daughter talking. This was a stranger wearing Sarah's face, saying things that cut deeper than any physical wound. "Where am I supposed to go?" I asked quietly. "I don't care," Sarah said, and the coldness in her voice made me shiver. "Go back to that studio apartment. Go to a hotel. Go live under a bridge. Just get out of my sight." "Sarah." David looked horrified. "Don't Sarah me," she turned on him too. "You want to stay married to me? Then you choose, her or me." The silence that followed was deafening. David looked at me with apologetic eyes, but he didn't speak. He didn't defend me. He didn't tell his wife she was being cruel and unreasonable. He chose his marriage over doing what was right, and I couldn't even blame him for that. "I'll pack my things," I whispered. It took me 3 hours to pack 30 years of memories into 2 suitcases and a handful of boxes. Sarah stayed in their bedroom the entire time, and David awkwardly offered to help but clearly wanted to stay out of the crossfire. As I loaded my car, I kept expecting Sarah to come out, to apologize, to tell me she didn't mean it. I kept thinking this was just a terrible moment that we'd laugh about someday. She never came out. I drove away from that house at 11:30 p.m. on a Thursday night with nowhere to go and no one to call. I sat in a 24-hour diner until morning, drinking coffee and crying into napkins while the night shift workers pretended not to notice the middle-aged woman falling apart in booth 7. By dawn, I had made a decision. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to grovel or plead or try to convince my daughter that I deserved basic human decency. I had spent 30 years putting her needs before my own, and this was my reward. Fine. I would figure out how to survive on my own. I drove to the cheapest motel I could find and rented a room by the week. It smelled like stale cigarettes and broken dreams, but it had 4 walls and a roof, which was more than I'd had the night before. The next few weeks were the darkest of my life. I was 55 years old, living in a motel, working at a grocery store for barely above minimum wage because my previous employers had downsized or closed. I had no savings, every penny had gone to Sarah's education, her wedding, her life. I applied for dozens of jobs, but the economy was tough, and employers weren't exactly lining up to hire middle-aged women with gaps in their employment history. I had been so focused on being Sarah's mother that I had forgotten to build a life for myself. The studio apartment I'd lived in before was no longer available, and even if it had been, I couldn't afford the deposit. I looked at apartment after apartment, each one more depressing than the last, each one beyond my financial reach. I called my sister in Ohio, the only family I had left. Mary, I know we haven't talked much, but I'm in a tough spot. Margaret, I'd love to help, but Tom just got laid off, and we're barely keeping our heads above water. Maybe in a few months. I understood. I wasn't angry, but I had never felt more alone in my life. 3 weeks after Sarah threw me out, I was sitting in my motel room, eating a can of soup heated in the bathroom sink, when my phone rang. For just a moment, my heart leaped. Maybe it was Sarah. Maybe she had come to her senses. It wasn't Sarah. It was David. Margaret? I wanted to call and check on you. I'm fine, I lied. Sarah filed for divorce, he said quietly. Despite everything, my heart broke for both of them. I'm sorry, David. She's not doing well. The paranoia has gotten worse. I think she needs help, but she won't listen to anyone. She won't listen to me either, I said. I'm the last person she wants to hear from. I know this isn't fair to ask, but would you consider talking to her? I'm worried about her mental health. I almost laughed. Almost. David, your wife threw me out of her house and told me to live under a bridge. I don't think she's interested in my input on her mental health. She's sick, Margaret. I really think she's sick. That doesn't excuse cruelty, I said, and for the first time in my life, I hung up on someone who was trying to reach out to me. I wish I could tell you that I had some grand revelation, some moment of inspiration that turned everything around. The truth is much more mundane and, in some ways, more miraculous. I was walking back from the grocery store, carrying a bag of discounted vegetables and day-old bread, when I literally bumped into Mrs. Chen, my neighbor from my old house, the house I'd sold to pay for Sarah's education. Margaret? Oh my goodness, is that you? Mrs. Chen had been more than a neighbor, she'd been a friend. We'd shared cups of coffee on Sunday mornings, traded gardening tips, watched each other's houses during vacations. Hello, Mrs. Chen, I managed, suddenly embarrassed by my appearance. I hadn't been taking great care of myself, and I'm sure it showed. My dear, you look. She paused diplomatically. Are you all right? Something about her genuine concern broke down the wall I'd been building around my heart. Standing there on the sidewalk, clutching my bag of discount groceries, I started crying. Mrs. Chen didn't ask questions. She simply took my arm and walked me to the coffee shop on the corner. For the next hour, I told her everything. About selling the house, about living with Sarah, about being thrown out, about the motel and the job search and the crushing loneliness. Mrs. Chen listened without judgment, occasionally patting my hand or making sympathetic sounds. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Margaret, do you remember my nephew Richard? I did, vaguely. He'd visited a few times when I still lived in the neighborhood. A serious young man who worked in real estate or property management, something like that. Richard has been looking for a property manager for some of his rental units. Someone trustworthy, someone who understands the value of taking care of things. The pay isn't wonderful, but it comes with a small apartment above one of his properties. Would you be interested? I stared at her. Mrs. Chen, I can't accept charity. This isn't charity, she said firmly. Richard needs help, and you need a job and a place to live. Sometimes the universe provides exactly what we need when we need it most. 2 days later, I was sitting in Richard Chen's office, filling out paperwork for my new job as a residential property manager. The salary was modest but livable, and the apartment was small but clean and safe. More importantly, it came with a sense of purpose I'd been missing. The tenants can be challenging sometimes, Richard warned me. But I have a feeling you can handle it. My aunt says you're one of the strongest people she knows. If only he knew how weak I'd been feeling. Managing rental properties turned out to be more complex than I'd expected, but also more rewarding. Richard owned 12 properties scattered across the city, a mix of single-family homes, duplexes, and small apartment buildings. My job was to handle day-to-day operations, collecting rent, coordinating repairs, showing units to prospective tenants, and dealing with the inevitable drama that comes with being a landlord. The apartment Richard provided was above a duplex in a quiet neighborhood. Nothing fancy, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a small kitchen, and a living room that doubled as my office. But it was mine, and after weeks in that depressing motel, it felt like a palace. I threw myself into the work with an intensity that surprised even me. I learned about tenant rights and landlord responsibilities, studied local housing laws, figured out how to negotiate with contractors and handle security deposits. Richard was impressed with my attention to detail and my ability to defuse tense situations. "You have a gift for this," he told me after I'd successfully mediated a dispute between 2 tenants who'd been at each other's throats for months. "Have you ever considered getting your real estate license?" I hadn't, but the seed was planted. Within 6 months, I'd enrolled in evening real estate classes. It was challenging, studying after full days of property management work, but I was hungry for something that was mine, something Sarah couldn't take away from me. During this time, I heard through Mrs. Chin that Sarah and David's divorce had been finalized. David had moved to another state for a job opportunity. Sarah was living alone in that big house, still working but apparently struggling with what Mrs. Chin diplomatically called personal issues. I felt sad for her, but I didn't reach out. I couldn't. The wound was still too fresh, and I was finally starting to build something for myself. A year after starting my job with Richard, I passed the real estate exam. Richard offered to help me get established as an agent, but I had a different idea brewing. What if I started buying properties myself? I asked him over coffee one morning. Small places, fixer-uppers, properties I could manage and gradually build equity in. Richard smiled. "Margaret, that's exactly how I got started. But it takes capital." "I know. But I've been saving every penny, and I have an idea." My first property purchase was a tiny house that had seen better days. Much better days. The roof leaked, the plumbing was questionable, and the previous tenant had left it in such bad condition that Richard was considering just selling it as is to a demolition company. "I'll buy it from you at fair market value," I proposed. "As is." Richard looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Margaret, that place needs at least $15,000 in repairs. Then I'll fix it up and rent it out. If I can't make the payments, you can foreclose and get it back." It was a risk, but Richard agreed to seller financing with a small down payment. I spent every weekend for 3 months working on that house. I learned to patch drywall, install flooring, fix leaky faucets, and paint like a professional. YouTube became my best friend, and I discovered I had a knack for renovation work. The house that Richard thought was unsalvageable became a charming starter home. I rented it to a young couple for enough to cover the mortgage payment and put a little extra in my pocket. 6 months later, I bought another property. Then another. I was strategic about my purchases, looking for houses in up-and-coming neighborhoods, places where young professionals were starting to move as they were priced out of more expensive areas. I focused on quality renovations that would attract good tenants, people who would take care of the properties and pay their rent on time. Richard became my mentor and, eventually, my business partner. We formed a small property management company, with me handling the day-to-day operations and him providing financial backing for larger purchases. 3 years after Sarah threw me out, I owned 7 rental properties and managed 15 more. I had a healthy savings account, a reliable income, and something I'd never had before, true independence. I was finally building the life I should have built for myself years earlier. It was a Tuesday morning in October when my phone rang with a call that would change everything. "Good morning, Chin Property Management. This is Margaret speaking." "Hi, I'm calling about the rental listing on Maple Street. Is it still available?" The voice was familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. We'd listed a beautiful 3-bedroom house just a few days earlier, one of our premium properties in a desirable neighborhood. "Yes, it's still available. Would you like to schedule a showing?" "That would be great. When would be convenient?" "I have an opening this afternoon at 2 p.m., or tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. This afternoon works perfectly. My name is Sarah Mitchell." My blood turned to ice. Sarah Mitchell. Sarah had taken back her maiden name after the divorce. "I'm sorry, could you repeat your name?" I managed to ask. "Sarah Mitchell. Is there a problem?" There it was. My daughter's voice, older and more tired than I remembered, but unmistakably hers. She didn't recognize my voice, or maybe she did and was pretending not to. No problem at all. I'll meet you at the property at 2 p.m. Do you have the address? Yes, I have it. Thank you. The line went dead, and I sat staring at my phone for a full 5 minutes. Sarah was looking for a rental. Sarah, who'd owned that beautiful house with David. Sarah, who'd told me to live under a bridge. Sarah, who hadn't spoken to me in over 3 years. My first instinct was to call her back and find an excuse to assign the showing to someone else. I wasn't ready for this. I might never be ready for this. But another part of me, a part one didn't entirely recognize, was curious. What had happened to her? Why was she looking for a rental? How had her life changed since she'd thrown me out of it? I decided to go to the showing. I arrived at the Maple Street property 30 minutes early, ostensibly to make sure everything was ready for the showing, but really to give myself time to prepare emotionally for seeing Sarah again. The house was one of our best listings, a recently renovated 3-bedroom with hardwood floors, updated kitchen, and a small but lovely backyard. The rent was $2,200 a month, which put it in the upper tier of our portfolio. At exactly 2 p.m., a car pulled up to the curb. I watched from the front window as Sarah got out, and my heart nearly stopped. She looked older than her 32 years. Her hair, once glossy and perfectly styled, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She'd lost weight, too much weight, and there were dark circles under her eyes. She was still beautiful, but it was a fragile beauty, like something that might break if you looked at it too hard. I opened the front door before she could knock. "Hello, Sarah." Her face went white. For a moment, I thought she might turn around and leave. Instead, she straightened her shoulders in a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. "Margaret, I didn't know you worked in real estate. There's a lot you don't know about me these days." The words came out more sharply than I'd intended, and I immediately regretted them. Whatever had happened between us, whatever pain we'd caused each other, she was still my daughter. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "That was uncalled for. Would you like to see the house?" Sarah nodded mutely, and I began the tour I'd given dozens of times before. Professional, courteous, pointing out the features and amenities. But there was an undercurrent of tension that made every word feel loaded with meaning. "The kitchen was completely renovated last year," I said, running my hand along the granite countertop. "New appliances, custom cabinets. It's lovely," Sarah said quietly. "How much is the rent?" $2,200 a month, plus utilities. First month's rent and security deposit due at signing. I saw her flinch slightly at the price, which surprised me. When she was married to David, they'd been living quite comfortably. Why would $2,200 be a concern? "The master bedroom has a walk-in closet and ensuite bathroom," I continued, leading her upstairs. Sarah nodded and made appropriate comments, but I could see her doing mental calculations. She was worried about money. My daughter, who'd had everything handed to her, who'd never wanted for anything, was worried about whether she could afford rent. "Can I ask what happened to your house?" The question slipped out before I could stop myself. Sarah's face flushed. "That's not really your business, is it?" "You're right. I'm sorry." We finished the tour in uncomfortable silence. As we stood on the front porch, Sarah turned to me with an expression I couldn't read. "I'd like to apply for the house, Sarah. I can provide references, proof of income, whatever you need. I'm a good tenant." I stared at my daughter, this woman I'd raised and loved and sacrificed everything for, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something like possibility. "I'll need to run a credit check and verify your employment," I said. "That's standard procedure." "I understand. There's also a waiting list. I'll need to review all applications before making a decision." "Of course." But we both knew there was no waiting list. We both knew this conversation was about more than rental applications and credit checks. That evening, I sat in my apartment with Sarah's rental application spread across my kitchen table. Her employment verification showed she was still working at the same marketing firm, but her salary was significantly lower than I'd expected. The credit report told a more troubling story. Sarah had significant credit card debt, medical bills, a foreclosure on the house she'd shared with David. Her credit score had dropped nearly 200 points since the divorce. I stared at the papers, trying to piece together what had happened to the daughter who'd once had everything going for her. The medical bills were particularly concerning. There were charges for a psychiatrist, a psychologist, and what appeared to be a brief stay at a mental health facility. David had been right when he'd called me 3 years ago. Sarah had been sick, was still sick, possibly. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt like karma had finally caught up with the daughter who'd treated me so cruelly. Instead, I felt heartbroken. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Richard. "How did the showing go today?" he asked. "It was complicated." "Complicated how?" I took a deep breath. The prospective tenant is my daughter. Silence on the other end of the line. Richard knew about my family situation, not all the details, but enough to understand why this was significant. "Are you going to approve her application?" "I don't know. Her financials are questionable. High debt-to-income ratio, recent foreclosure, medical debt. Normally, I wouldn't even consider her. But she's not just any applicant." "No, she's not. What does your gut tell you?" My gut told me that Sarah was in trouble. Real trouble. The kind of trouble that comes from making bad decisions when you're not thinking clearly, from pushing away everyone who loves you, from letting pride and stubbornness destroy your life. My gut also told me that I had an opportunity here. Not for revenge, I wasn't interested in revenge, but for something else. Something that might heal both of us. "I think I'm going to approve her application," I said finally. "Even though she's a financial risk?" "Because she's my daughter." I called Sarah the next morning. "Hello? Sarah, it's Margaret. I've reviewed your application for the Maple Street property." Silence. I could almost hear her holding her breath. "Your application has been approved." "It has?" The relief in her voice was palpable. "However, there are some additional terms we need to discuss." "What kind of terms?" I'd spent most of the night thinking about this. I could have simply been her landlord, collected rent, maintained the property, kept our relationship strictly business. But that felt like a wasted opportunity. "Given your recent financial difficulties, I'm going to require an additional security deposit. 2 months' rent instead of 1. I can't afford that right now." "I know. Which is why I'm willing to let you work off the additional deposit." "Work it off?" "I don't understand. I own several properties that need maintenance work. Painting, landscaping, minor repairs. If you're willing to put in 20 hours a week for the first 6 months, I'll waive the additional deposit." It wasn't really about the maintenance work. All of my properties were well maintained, and I could hire contractors for any work that needed to be done. This was about something else entirely. "Why would you do that?" Sarah asked suspiciously. "Because despite everything that's happened between us, I don't want to see you fail." Another long silence. "And if I refuse?" "Then you refuse. I'm not going to withdraw the rental offer. But the additional deposit stands." "This isn't charity, is it?" "No, Sarah. It's business. You need a place to live, I need reliable tenants, and some of my properties could use attention. It's mutually beneficial. I'll do it." "Good. Can you come by my office tomorrow morning to sign the lease and discuss the work schedule?" "Yes." "And Margaret?" "Yes, thank you." They were just 2 words, but they carried more weight than she probably realized. It was the first time she'd thanked me for anything in over 3 years. The first few weeks were awkward, to put it mildly. Sarah would show up at whatever property I'd assigned her to work on, do her tasks with minimal conversation, and leave as quickly as possible. She was efficient and thorough. I had to give her that. Years of working in marketing had taught her how to manage projects and pay attention to details. I tried to give her space while still supervising her work. It was a delicate balance, and I didn't always get it right. "You don't need to check on me every hour," she said one afternoon when I'd stopped by to see how she was progressing on painting a rental unit's living room. "I'm not checking on you. I'm checking on my property." "It feels like you're checking on me." "Sarah, this is my business. I check on all my properties regularly. But I'm not all your properties. I'm your daughter working off a security deposit because she screwed up her life." There it was. The first acknowledgement of what had brought us to this point. "Yes," I said simply. "You are." Sarah set down her paint roller and looked at me. Really looked at me, maybe for the first time since I'd walked into that rental showing. "You look good," she said quietly. "Healthy. Happy, even." "I am happy. It took a while, but I figured out how to build a life for myself. I'm glad." She picked up the roller again, but she wasn't painting. She was just holding it, staring at the wall. "I heard David moved to Portland." "Yes. He sends me emails sometimes. Updates about his life. He remarried. How do you feel about that?" Sarah laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "I feel like I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me because I was convinced everyone was trying to hurt me." "Were you sick, Sarah? When you threw me out?" She was quiet for so long I thought she wasn't going to answer. "I was having panic attacks," she said finally. "Constant anxiety. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I was convinced David was cheating, convinced my coworkers were conspiring against me, convinced you were trying to control my life. I wasn't trying to control your life. I know that now. I knew it then, too, deep down. But I couldn't stop the thoughts. It was like having someone else's voice in my head, telling me that everyone was against me. Did you get help? Eventually. After I'd destroyed my marriage, lost the house, and alienated the one person who'd never stopped loving me. She looked directly at me. I spent 2 weeks in a psychiatric facility. Anxiety disorder with paranoid features, they called it. Started medication, therapy, the whole thing. Are you better now? Better, yes. Cured, probably not. I still have bad days, but I can think clearly most of the time now. Clear enough to know that I was cruel to you in ways that were unforgivable. I felt tears prick my eyes. Nothing is unforgivable, Sarah. Isn't it? Over the next few months, something began to shift between us. Not healing, exactly, but a cautious rebuilding. Like two people learning to trust each other again after a terrible betrayal. Sarah threw herself into the maintenance work with an intensity that surprised me. She researched techniques online, asked questions about proper procedures, took pride in doing things right. It reminded me of the little girl who used to help me plant sunflowers in our garden, determined to make them grow taller than the fence. I never realized how much work goes into maintaining rental properties, she said one day as we stood in the backyard of a duplex she'd spent the morning weeding. All these years, I just assumed landlords were getting easy money. Nothing about this business is easy, I replied. But it's honest work. I sleep well at night knowing I'm providing decent homes for people who need them. Is that why you got into it? To help people? I considered the question. I got into it to survive. To build something for myself after I lost everything else. But yes, I've discovered I like helping people have a safe place to live. Sarah nodded, still looking at the garden she'd rescued from weeks of neglect. I used to think business was just about making money. What do you think now? I think maybe the best businesses are about solving problems. You solve people's housing problems, and you make money in the process. It was a small conversation, but it felt significant. For the first time in years, we were talking about ideas, about philosophy, about something other than the practical details of work or the painful history between us. Slowly, very slowly, we began to talk about other things. Sarah told me about her therapy sessions, about the medications she was taking, about the long process of rebuilding her life after the divorce. I told her about my evening real estate classes, about Mrs. Chen's kindness, about the satisfaction I found in renovation work. We were learning to be in each other's presence without the weight of expectation or the sting of old wounds dominating every interaction. Just when I thought we were making real progress, everything nearly fell apart again. It was a Friday evening in February when Sarah called me, sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. "Mom, I need help. I'm at the emergency room." My heart stopped. What happened? Are you hurt? I'm okay, physically. But they want to admit me to the psychiatric ward. I had a panic attack at work, and it was so bad they called an ambulance. I was in my car and driving toward the hospital before she finished explaining. I found her in the ER waiting area, looking small and fragile in a hospital gown, her eyes red from crying. When she saw me, her face crumpled. "I thought I was getting better," she whispered. "I thought I had it under control." "Mental health isn't linear," I said, sitting beside her and taking her hand. "There are setbacks. That doesn't mean you're not getting better overall. The doctor says I should stay for observation. Maybe adjust my medications. But I can't afford to miss work, and I can't afford the hospital bills." I looked at my daughter, this woman I'd raised and lost and was slowly getting to know again, and I made a decision. "You're going to stay," I said firmly. "However long they recommend. I'll handle everything else." "Mom, you can't." "Yes, I can. I'll call your work, explain that you have a medical emergency. I'll take care of your rent, your bills, whatever needs handling. You focus on getting well. I can't let you do that. You can't stop me from doing that." Sarah stared at me, fresh tears streaming down her cheeks. "After everything I did to you, why would you?" "Because you're my daughter," I said simply. "Because I love you. Because when someone you love is drowning, you don't stop to ask if they deserve to be saved." Sarah stayed in the hospital for a week. I visited her every day, sometimes just sitting quietly while she slept, sometimes talking about neutral topics like the weather or what was happening with the rental properties. On the 4th day, she was more lucid, the medication adjustment starting to take effect. "I need to tell you something," she said as I settled into the uncomfortable visitor's chair beside her bed. "You don't need to tell me anything." "Yes, I do. I need to tell you why I really threw you out that night." I waited, not sure I wanted to hear this but knowing she needed to say it. "It wasn't about David, not really. I mean, I was paranoid about him cheating, But that wasn't why I kicked you out. Then why? Sarah took a shaky breath. Because every time I looked at you, I saw everything I wasn't. You sacrificed everything for me, your home, your security, your own dreams, and all I ever did was take. And the worse my mental health got, the more guilty I felt, and the more I hated myself for being such a selfish person. She was crying now, but she continued. And then you were living in my house, being helpful and kind and understanding, and it was like having a mirror that showed me exactly how ungrateful and horrible I was. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand being reminded of how much you'd given up for me. So you threw me out. So I threw you out. Because it was easier to be angry at you than to face what kind of person I'd become. I sat in silence, processing this revelation. All these years, I'd thought Sarah had rejected me because she no longer needed me, because I'd become a burden. The truth was more complex and, in some ways, more painful. I destroyed my marriage the same way, she continued. David loved me, and I knew he loved me, but I was so convinced I didn't deserve it that I kept looking for proof he was lying. I created the problems I was afraid of. Sarah, let me finish. Please. She wiped her eyes with a tissue. That night when I told you to live under a bridge, I became the worst version of myself. I said things that were designed to hurt you as much as possible because I was in so much pain and I wanted someone else to hurt too. I know. Do you forgive me? The question hung in the air between us. It was the question I'd been avoiding, even in my own thoughts, for months. Did I forgive her? Could I forgive her? I'm working on it, I said finally. Forgiveness isn't a switch I can flip, Sarah. It's a process. I understand. But I want you to know that sitting here now, seeing you face what happened and take responsibility for it, that means everything to me. When Sarah was discharged from the hospital, something fundamental had changed between us. Not everything was fixed. Healing from that kind of betrayal takes time. But we had a foundation now. Honesty. Understanding. A shared commitment to doing better. Sarah returned to her maintenance work with a different attitude. She wasn't just working off a debt anymore. She was learning a trade, discovering skills she hadn't known she possessed. I think I want to get my real estate license, she told me one afternoon as we painted the exterior of a small rental house together. Why? Because I like this. The property management, helping people find homes, fixing things. I like working with my hands, and I like the business side of it too. I felt a flutter of something that might have been pride. It's hard work. Good. I need hard work. I need to know I'm earning what I have. What about your marketing job? I gave notice last week. I stopped painting and looked at her. Sarah, that's a big decision. Are you sure you're ready for that kind of change? I'm sure. I've been thinking about it for weeks. My therapist thinks it's a good idea too. She says I need to find work that aligns with my values, and marketing, it just doesn't anymore. 6 months later, Sarah passed her real estate exam. Richard offered her a position with our property management company, and she accepted. Working together every day could have been a disaster, but somehow it wasn't. We developed professional boundaries that allowed us to collaborate effectively while still navigating our personal relationship carefully. Sarah had a natural talent for real estate. She was good with people, understood their needs, had an eye for what would make a property appealing. Within a year, she was bringing in new clients and helping expand our business. It was a Sunday morning in May, almost 2 years after Sarah had first called about the Maple Street rental, when she showed up at my apartment unannounced. I brought coffee, she said, holding up a bag from my favorite bakery. And those blueberry muffins you like. What's the occasion? I wanted to talk to you about something. We settled at my small kitchen table with our coffee and muffins, the spring sunlight streaming through the windows. It felt peaceful, domestic in a way that reminded me of Sunday mornings when Sarah was little. I've been thinking about the house, she said. Which house? Our old house, the one you sold to pay for my college. My chest tightened. What about it? It's for sale again. I drive by it sometimes, and there's a sign in the yard now. I knew this already. I'd driven by it myself a few weeks earlier, mostly out of curiosity. The current owners had done some nice updates, but it was still recognizably the home where Sarah had grown up. Are you thinking of buying it? I asked. I'm thinking we should buy it. We? Sarah leaned forward, her eyes bright with excitement. A partnership. You handle the business side, I handle the sales and marketing. We buy it, fix it up, and either flip it or turn it into a rental. Sarah, that house has sentimental value for both of us. Mixing business with emotion is usually a bad idea. Or maybe it's exactly what we need. I studied my daughter's face, looking for signs of the impulsiveness that had gotten her into trouble before. But this felt different, thoughtful, considered. Have you run the numbers? She pulled out a folder. Of course she had. Purchase price, estimated renovation costs, potential rental income, comparable sales in the neighborhood. I've done my homework. She had. The numbers actually looked good. The house was priced below market value because it needed cosmetic updates, but the bones were solid. I knew because I'd maintained it well when I lived there. Why is this important to you? I asked. Sarah was quiet for a moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. Because I want to give you back what you lost. Not the exact same thing, but something meaningful. You sacrificed your home for my education, and I want to use that education to help you get it back. I don't need you to give me anything, Sarah. I know you don't need it, but I need to give it. 3 months later, Sarah and I stood in the living room of our old house, now officially ours again. We'd closed on the purchase that morning, and Sarah had insisted we come by to officially claim it before heading to our celebration lunch. The house felt smaller than I remembered, but it also felt full of possibilities. Sarah's renovation plans were ambitious but thoughtful, updating the kitchen and bathrooms while preserving the character that made the house special. I want to keep the height marks, she said, running her finger along the kitchen doorframe where we'd measured her growth throughout her childhood. That's probably not good for resale value. We're not selling this one, remember? This is going to be a rental, and someday, maybe another family will make height marks right next to mine. We decided to renovate the house and rent it to a family, specifically, a family with children who needed a safe, affordable place to live. It wouldn't be the most profitable option, but it felt right. I have something for you, Sarah said, reaching into her purse. She handed me a small wrapped box. Inside was a key, not the new house key, but an old brass key I recognized immediately. Where did you find this? I never gave it back when you moved out. I kept it all these years. It was the key to the front door of our old house, the original key from when I'd first bought the place over 20 years earlier. The key that had let me into my first real home, the place where I'd raised my daughter and planted sunflowers and believed in the future. I don't understand why you kept it. Because part of me always knew I'd been wrong to make you leave, and part of me hoped that someday, you'd come home. I felt tears starting, but they weren't sad tears. They were the kind of tears that come when something that was broken finally heals. Mom? Yes? I'm sorry it took so long. I'm not, I said, surprising us both. If it had happened sooner, we might not have been ready. You might not have learned what you needed to learn, and I might not have discovered who I could become on my own. Do you really believe that? I really do. Working together as equal partners transformed both our relationship and our business in ways I hadn't expected. Sarah brought energy and innovation to our property management company. She created a website, developed marketing materials, established relationships with contractors and suppliers. Her marketing background proved invaluable in attracting quality tenants and expanding our client base. Meanwhile, I focused on what I did best: operations, maintenance, and building relationships with property owners who wanted to hire us to manage their investments. Within a year, we were managing 43 properties and had purchased 6 more for our own portfolio. We hired 2 part-time employees and moved into a proper office space. I never imagined I'd be a businesswoman, I told Mrs. Chen one afternoon when she stopped by our new office to see how we were doing. I always knew you had it in you, she replied with a smile. You just needed the right circumstances to let it emerge. Thank you for introducing me to Richard. I don't know where I'd be without that opportunity. You would have found another way, Mrs. Chen said confidently. Strong people always do. Sarah overheard this conversation and joined us. She's right, you know. You're the strongest person I know. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm making it up as I go along most of the time. That's what strong people do, Sarah said. They keep going even when they don't know what they're doing. Our business relationship had given us a framework for rebuilding our personal relationship. We had shared goals, shared responsibilities, shared success. We were partners in the truest sense, each contributing our strengths to create something neither of us could have built alone. But more than that, we were learning to be mother and daughter again. Not the mother and daughter we'd been before. That relationship had been too unequal, too dependent, but something new. Something built on mutual respect and understanding. One evening, as we were closing up the office after a particularly successful day, Sarah asked me a question that caught me off guard. Do you think you would have been happier if you'd built this life for yourself when I was younger? Instead of sacrificing everything for me? I considered the question carefully. It wasn't the first time I'd thought about it, but it was the first time Sarah had asked so directly. I think I would have been different, I said finally. Whether I would have been happier, I don't know. But I think both of us would have been healthier. How so? I think if I'd maintained more independence, more of my own identity, you might have felt less pressure to be perfect, less guilt about my sacrifices, and I might have felt more secure in myself, less dependent on your approval for my sense of worth. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. I used to resent how much you gave up for me, even though I never said so. It felt like pressure to justify your sacrifices by being successful and grateful all the time. And when you couldn't maintain that anymore, when your mental health started suffering, the guilt and resentment exploded. Exactly. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both of us processing this insight. I think the hardest lesson I've learned, I continued, is that loving someone doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for them. Real love requires boundaries, independence, mutual respect. I loved you intensely, but I didn't love you well. I didn't love you well either, Sarah said. I took your sacrifices for granted and then punished you for making them. We were both doing the best we could with what we knew at the time. Are we doing better now? I looked around our office, at the business we'd built together, at my daughter who'd grown into a capable, thoughtful partner, at the life neither of us could have imagined 3 years earlier. Yes, I said. I think we are. It was a Tuesday morning in September when David walked into our office. I recognized him immediately, though he looked older and more serious than I remembered. He was well-dressed, confident, clearly successful in his new life. Hello, Margaret, he said, extending his hand. It's good to see you. David. This is a surprise. Sarah emerged from the back office at the sound of voices and stopped dead when she saw her ex-husband. Hi, Sarah. Hi. Her voice was carefully neutral. What brings you to town? Business meeting in the city. I thought I'd stop by and see how you're doing. I'm doing well, Sarah said, and I could hear the pride in her voice. We're doing well. This is our business. David looked around the office, taking in the professional setup, the awards on the wall, the photos of properties we'd renovated. I'm impressed, he said, and he seemed to mean it. I heard you got your real estate license 2 years ago. We're partners now. Sarah gestured toward me. Equal partners. That's wonderful. David turned to me. And you? How are you doing? I'm very well, thank you. An awkward silence settled over the office. There was so much history in the room, so many complicated feelings. I wanted to apologize, David said suddenly, for not defending you that night. When things got out of hand, I should have stood up for you. I felt Sarah tense beside me. You were in an impossible situation, I said diplomatically. That doesn't excuse it. You were family, and I let my wife treat you horribly without saying a word. Ex-wife, Sarah corrected quietly. Ex-wife, David acknowledged. But that doesn't change the fact that I was wrong. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It means something. David stayed for about an hour, and we talked about neutral topics, business, the economy, changes in the city. When he got up to leave, he shook my hand again and turned to Sarah. I'm proud of what you've built here, he said. And I'm glad you and your mother found your way back to each other. After he left, Sarah and I sat in silence for several minutes. How do you feel about seeing him? I asked finally. Sad, she said. But not the kind of sad that makes me want to change anything. Just sad that I hurt someone who loved me. That's growth, is it? Being able to feel regret without being overwhelmed by it. Being able to acknowledge mistakes without being destroyed by shame. Yes, that's growth. As our business continued to grow, so did our circle of people who felt like family. Mrs. Chen became a regular visitor to our office, often bringing homemade soup or cookies and updates on the neighborhood. Richard remained both a business partner and a friend, someone we could count on for advice and support. We hired Maria, a recent immigrant from El Salvador, as our office manager. She was efficient, organized, and had a natural warmth that made clients feel welcome. When we learned she was struggling to find affordable housing for her family, we offered her one of our rental properties at below-market rent. You don't have to do that, she protested. Good employees are hard to find, Sarah said practically. We want you to stay. But the truth was more personal than that. Maria reminded us both of something important. That family isn't just about blood relations. Sometimes the people who become most important to us are the ones we choose to love and support. We also developed relationships with several of our tenants that went beyond the typical landlord-tenant dynamic. When the Johnsons' teenage son was applying to colleges, Sarah helped him with his application essays. When Mrs. Rodriguez's husband was laid off, we worked out a payment plan that allowed them to stay in their home until he found new work. We're not running a charity, I reminded Sarah during one of our weekly business meetings. I know. But we're not just running a business either. We're part of a community. She was right. We'd accidentally created something more valuable than just a property management company. We'd built a network of relationships, a web of mutual support and care. Is this what you imagined when you started working for Richard? Sarah asked. Not at all, I admitted. I thought I was just finding a way to survive. I had no idea I was finding a way to thrive. What's the difference? Surviving is about getting through each day. Thriving is about creating something meaningful that extends beyond yourself. And this feels meaningful to you? I looked around our office, thought about our tenants, our employees, the families living in homes we'd helped them find or restore. More meaningful than anything I've ever done. 3 years after Sarah first walked into that rental showing, we were standing in the backyard of our old house, watching a new family move in. The Garcias had 2 young children and were renting the house through our company. Mr. Garcia worked construction, Mrs. Garcia was a nurse, and their kids, Sophia, age 8, and Miguel, age 6, were bouncing with excitement about having their own backyard. Can we plant a garden? Sophia asked her mother in Spanish. Sarah answered in surprisingly fluent Spanish, something she'd been learning to better serve our diverse client base. Of course. The landlords love gardens. I watched my daughter interact with this family, helping them understand how the appliances worked, giving them information about the neighborhood schools, and I felt a profound sense of completion. This was what redemption looked like. Not a dramatic moment of forgiveness or a tearful reconciliation, but this, a family finding a home, a daughter using her talents to serve others, a relationship rebuilt on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. Do you ever regret selling this house the first time? Sarah asked as we drove back to the office. No, I said, and I meant it. If I hadn't sold it, you wouldn't have gotten your education. If I hadn't lost everything, I wouldn't have discovered what I was capable of building on my own. If we hadn't hurt each other, we might not have learned how to love each other better. So you think everything happened the way it was supposed to? I think everything happened the way it did, and we found a way to make meaning from it. That's very philosophical for a Tuesday afternoon. I laughed. I'm allowed to be philosophical. I'm a successful businesswoman now. Yes, you are, Sarah said with obvious pride. You really, really are. As I sit here today, recording this story for all of you, I'm struck by how different my life looks from what I expected at 55. I thought my purpose was to sacrifice everything for my daughter's success. I thought love meant giving until there was nothing left of yourself. I thought security came from being needed by other people. I was wrong about all of it. Real love requires boundaries. Real security comes from your own capabilities and relationships built on mutual respect. Real purpose isn't about sacrificing yourself for others. It's about using your gifts to create something meaningful in the world. When Sarah threw me out that night, calling me trash and telling me to live under a bridge, she wasn't just rejecting me. She was rejecting the unhealthy dynamic we'd created together, where I existed only to serve her needs and she carried the crushing weight of justifying my sacrifices. Neither of us knew that at the time. We were both trapped in patterns we didn't understand, hurting each other in ways we couldn't see clearly until much later. But sometimes life has a way of breaking us open so we can grow into who we're meant to be. I needed to lose everything to discover what I was capable of building on my own. Sarah needed to face the consequences of her actions to understand the value of what she'd thrown away. We both needed to learn that healthy relationships require 2 whole people choosing to support each other, not one person disappearing into the service of another. The business we built together isn't just about managing properties or helping people find homes. It's about proving that broken relationships can be healed, that people can change, that it's never too late to become the person you're meant to be. Our story doesn't end with Sarah and me, though. The lessons we learned, the healing we experienced, the business we built, all of it has created ripples that extend far beyond our personal relationship. Maria, our office manager, used the skills she learned working with us to start her own small business helping other immigrant families navigate the rental market. She still works with us part-time, but now she's also building something for herself. The Johnson's son got into his first-choice college with Sarah's help and is now studying engineering. Mrs. Rodriguez's husband found not just a new job but a better career after we connected him with one of our contractors who needed skilled workers. Richard and I have expanded our partnership to include affordable housing development. We're working on a project to convert an abandoned warehouse into apartments for working families who've been priced out of traditional housing. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah and I have learned to model a different kind of mother-daughter relationship. When Maria brings her teenage daughter to the office, she sees 2 women working as equal partners, supporting each other's growth, handling disagreements with respect and honesty. I want that with my daughter when she grows up, Maria told me recently. I want us to be partners like you and Sarah. It's possible, I told her. But it requires letting go of the idea that love means control, and embracing the idea that love means empowerment. What's the difference? Control is about making someone dependent on you. Empowerment is about helping them become capable of living without you, then choosing to stay connected anyway. This distinction has become central to how I think about all relationships now, not just with Sarah, but with our employees, our tenants, our community. Sarah is 35 now, and she's become someone I genuinely admire, not just as a mother, but as a person. She's thoughtful, capable, generous, and strong in ways that don't require diminishing others. She's also dating someone new, a teacher named Michael who treats her with kindness and respect. When she brought him to our office Christmas party last year, I watched him interact with our employees and clients, and I saw someone who values Sarah's strength rather than being threatened by it. Are you going to marry him? I asked her later. Maybe. We're taking it slowly. I want to make sure I'm healthy enough for a real partnership. What does that look like? It means I can be happy for his successes without feeling like they diminish me. It means I can support him without losing myself. It means I can ask for help without feeling like I'm failing. These might sound like simple things, but I know how hard-won this wisdom is for Sarah. She's had to rebuild her understanding of what healthy relationships look like from the ground up. As for me, I'm content in ways I never was during all those years when I defined myself primarily as Sarah's mother. I have my own friends, my own interests, my own sense of purpose that doesn't depend on anyone else's needs or approval. I've even started dating again, something I never thought I'd do. His name is Robert. He's a retired contractor who helps us with some of our renovation projects, and he makes me laugh in ways I'd forgotten were possible. Are you happy? Sarah asked me recently. I'm happy, I said, and meant it completely. So what's the lesson here? What do I want you to take away from this long, complicated story? First, never sacrifice yourself completely for anyone else, not your children, not your partner, not anyone. Love that requires one person to disappear isn't love. It's codependency, and it ultimately hurts everyone involved. Second, it's never too late to rebuild, restart, or recreate your life. I was 55 and living in a motel when I started building the life I have now. Age is not a barrier to transformation if you're willing to do the work. Third, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or excusing harmful behavior. It means choosing to release the pain so you can move forward. You can forgive someone and still maintain boundaries. You can love someone and still protect yourself. Fourth, sometimes the worst things that happen to us crack us open in ways that allow us to become who we're meant to be. I wouldn't wish that night of rejection and homelessness on anyone, but I also can't regret it completely because it led to everything good in my life now. Finally, family isn't just about blood or obligation. Real family is about choice, respect, mutual support, and shared values. Sarah and I are family because we choose to be, because we've learned to love each other well, not because we're genetically related. If you're struggling with difficult family relationships, if you feel trapped in unhealthy patterns, if you think it's too late to change, I want you to know that transformation is always possible. It's not easy, it's not fast, and it's not comfortable. But it's possible. You are never too old, too broken, or too stuck to create a different life for yourself. Thank you for staying with me through this entire story. I know it was long, but some stories can't be rushed. Healing doesn't happen in sound bites. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. Seriously, it makes such a difference for creators like me. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. And most importantly, drop a comment below and tell me, where are you watching from, and what's one thing you learned from this story? I read every single comment, and I try to respond to as many as I can. You're not just viewers to me, you're part of a community of people who believe that growth is possible, that relationships can heal, and that it's never too late to become who you're meant to be. From my heart to yours, thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps you write a better chapter in your own. Until next time, remember, you are stronger than you know, more capable than you believe, and worthy of love that doesn't require you to diminish yourself. Take care, beautiful souls. I'll see you in the next video.